There's a black hole in my heart, and nothing can fill it up.
This scene started as a voice memo on Max Joseph's phone.
This is me doing my voiceover.
It's how Max builds most of his films, and this audio-first process gives him a unique voice that's influenced folks like Casey Neistat.
Hi, I'm Max. I work audio first.
You can tell the story with sound first, and then figure out the right visuals that complement that story.
Yeah.
Max's influence on YouTube goes all the way back to 2007 when he was making videos for Good Magazine, which got into Sundance and trudged a path for a new genre of online filmmaking.
I started on Final Cut 1. All of a sudden I was like, this is the best video game I've ever played.
He's made work for MTV, HBO, and even a feature film that stars Zac Efron. And of course, he edited the famous Casey video, Make It Count.
When I was working with Casey, he would say to me, oh man, that's so pleasing.
Max's documentaries on YouTube have gained millions of views, and he just released a new series on his channel called Happiness, which he premiered in LA earlier this month.
That's a children's playground in Santa Monica.
What? I sat down with Max to see if I could figure out where his unique voice and style comes from, and why he still loves coming back to YouTube to showcase his work.
That's awesome.
Max, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be here.
We just released a video on the Digital Spaghetti YouTube channel where we watched a piece of work that you edited, and we did not credit you as an editor. And oh boy, do I feel shitty about that.
I forgive you.
Okay.
That is, by the way, the plight of the editor.
Yeah?
They do a lot of the work and they remain invisible and they don't often get the credit.
I feel like your impact on YouTube culture, filmmaking culture, has extended probably far more than people even know.
To some degree, I've seen it spread, but I'm not a big YouTuber.
Yeah.
You know, I maybe post something like once a year.
Yeah.
But that's, recently that's changing.
With this series.
With this series.
Yeah. What is this series? What are we about to watch?
It's a doc series about happiness, and each episode is like a different deep dive into one aspect of happiness. Like one episode's about the philosophies around happiness. One episode's about achievement and success and how that relates to happiness. And another episode's about Scandinavia and why the hell they're so fucking happy. And it's kind of open-ended. Like it could keep on going.
So we're going to watch the first episode of this new series that right now when we're filming, it's not out yet.
It's very close to being done. It's just like the final touches are not quite on there yet. And I'll probably do them like the couple minutes before I hit upload.
Let's dive in.
All right, cool.
There's a black hole in my heart, and nothing can fill it up. I'm not quite sure how big it is, but no matter what I put into it, it's never enough to fill it up. I used to think that once I'd made it, once I fell in love and got married and achieved a certain level of success, then I'd be happy. My heart would be full. But I've had some achievements. And although my heart may be full for a couple days, I'll just wake up a week later feeling empty again. And I know that I'm not alone. It's no secret that everyone is struggling with their mental health.
The U.S. Surgeon General has called it an urgent public health crisis.
1 in 5 Americans will experience a mental illness in a given year.
Maybe we'd be better off understanding precisely what happiness is, so we can get better at experiencing it for ourselves. So I'm setting off on a journey, around the world and through the mysteries of science, to seek out world experts and figure out once and for all what happiness is all about.
This whole Charlie Chaplin style production, tell us about that choice. Like, why that, and how does that kind of weave in and out of this whole thing?
So it's a funny story. So I'd actually written a little, memo note to myself with this poem about the black hole in my heart, knowing that I wanted to do something with that idea. I work audio first. I'll speak what I'm trying to say into my iPhone and I'll record it and then I'll edit that and I'll find the right music to go along with that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's musical.
That actually makes so much sense now that's what your process is.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow, I think that order of operations is probably a lot of why it feels like you.
So I actually stumbled upon that process, like kind of accidentally in a moment of extreme stress and pressure. I was making this other video with my friends Rel and Henry about 12 or 13 years ago called A Brief History of John Baldessari.
In 100 years, John Baldessari suspects he will be best remembered as...
Oh, the guy that put dots over people's faces.
It was a video actually that Casey saw and was like, hey, you want to make some stuff with me too? And we were under the gun to finish it. And it was premiering. It was going to play at the LACMA, LA County Museum of Art, at their art and film gala. And it was honoring Clint Eastwood and John Baldessari. And everyone knows who Clint Eastwood was. But they needed a little film just to kind of bring everyone a little up to date on who John Baldessari was. They did this interview with John, and he gave them a really bad interview in that he kind of was annoyed. Very sparse, terse words.
John Baldessari's name is internationally recognized.
Cool.
We had 2 weeks to put this together, and I was coming apart at the seams. I was just having a nervous breakdown when I was making it. We had all these little pieces, but it didn't cohere. And it was okay, well, it needs to go to the sound mix. I'll just do the sound. And then I'll just put the visuals on top of it. And then we sent it to sound without any, with very little video on top of it. And then just populated the video. And that was an aha moment where it was oh, we can work that way.
You can tell the story with sound first and then figure out the right visuals that complement that story.
Yeah. I had this as a sound file.
With the music and everything.
Yeah, with the music and everything. I just kind of I played it for Kristen, who produced this with me. And I'm what does this make you think of? And she goes, I don't know, maybe vaudeville kind of thing. I was great idea. We'll do Charlie Chaplin.
Wow, that's so weird. I mean, in a great way. What you're saying is you're starting with music and sound and words, that whole thing. That's the entry point. And then the visuals come after completely.
Yeah.
I bet that, of course, that changes everything that comes out of you as a whole package.
So whether it's on my feature or documentary stuff, commercial stuff, there's always a lot of black holes in all the versions that I'm sending to people. And it throws people off. They're not used to it and they don't like it. And I don't like having to show it to them that way, but because deadlines are what they are, I have to. And I'm look, they're just black holes where I don't know what goes there. But it doesn't matter because it works. The underpinning works.
Let's talk about production for some of these shots here. The one that just immediately comes to mind is this beautiful shot on the boat here.
Yeah. I'm very proud of that shot.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
That's a children's playground in Santa Monica.
What?
Yeah, there's a park on the beach in Santa Monica with this boat thing that I had my eye on for a long time because I would go running by it. And I was oh my God, there's a great boat set. And I went in the Chaplin outfit, and LA's great because the sky is blue. It's a giant
blue screen.
So we shot it like that. There was some palm trees here that we matted out. These are some Pond 5 waves.
So it's just kind of just scrapbooked together.
Total scrapbook together.
And with some kind of, there's some lovely fog too.
Yeah,
to
there's
give it
some fog.
some motion.
The ship is kind of
right.
tilting. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
I don't think I've seen it. No.
It's amazing, and it is a masterclass in old school film effects,
practical
visual
effects.
Yeah, I love that aesthetic of that old timey old film. Very elaborate practical effects. And so I don't know, I was inspired by that and I wanted to do some cool stuff. All of this other stuff was shot in my garage This is all in my garage, which is what I love about LA.
With just a big black background or
With
something?
a black, a Duvetine background that we just put up. And then, you could also take that down. There would be a green screen. If you have a garage, you better have a green screen in there. And I invited my buddy Alex Gorosh over, who has helped me on numerous projects. I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want this like very simple visual effect of like this bottomless heart. And we just figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you are making these shots, is it like you have a day and you know exactly what you're going to shoot and you've mapped it out in a storyboard, and so you just have to kind of scramble through the day? Or are you literally just doing shot by shot and taking the time you need to get the shots and without a lot of pre-production?
Yeah, virtually no pre-production. And that's not always the case, but with this, it was. I was also like, I made this project over the last 2.5 years in between doing other things that were more structured. So I made a documentary for HBO Max a couple years ago called 15 Minutes of Shame.
Yeah.
Monica Lewinsky executive produced it. But I left that being like, I don't even know if anyone saw it. Like, who knows? It's not like releasing something on YouTube where
you get feedback and it's immediate. And
the impact when people come up to me, they're talking to me about bookstores or they're talking to me about dicks. No one's talking to me about 15 Minutes of Shame. And I never thought that these videos would ever do well on YouTube.
Any of them?
No.
Beautiful. Love that. When you got this shot, did you know that was what you were going to do to it?
No. But I was just collecting B-roll. I love shooting B-roll. I just find it to be a meditation, like practice in and of itself. And I remember this shot because like it was right at dusk and the lights were coming on, and we shot it on like the Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I used to live there, so I'm very like familiar with this view.
It very much sets up the transition from the Charlie Chaplin mode to, it's like really a really nice way to kind of bridge that gap there.
So what's funny, though, is that in the radio edit, which is what I call that, whatever, pre-visual edit, I had the diegetic sound of the city come up before I even had this shot. So I knew that I would transition. I'm not trying to say I'm so great, but like I knew that song and that moment would end, and there would have to be like a kind of a smoke clearing moment where we'd need to, we got to sit down now. Mm-hmm. And so you'd want to go into some diegetic sound of like some city stuff, and then an interview starts.
And you call that bit the radio edit is just like the sound that you edit. That's your outline for that's the radio edit.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay, I am in Brooklyn, New York, in Dumbo, and I'm going to visit an old friend of mine, Ben Goldhirsch.
Who am I and why am I here? Yeah, it's a question I ask every day.
Ben has somewhat of a superhero origin story.
When I was a senior in high school, my mother passed away. And I was like, wow, like death is a reality. Like this thing ends.
Okay. It's hard not to talk about the subject matter in this particular case and to think about the filmmaking. But this has got to be a different process now, right? Like are you going audio first still?
Well, the audio is so married to the visual. So when you make the radio edit pieces, the video comes with it. And so that creates its own thing. But I've now been in situations where people want to do paper edits of interviews, and I really don't like that. Only if you have like absolutely no time and you're like put in between a rock and a hard place would I think should you ever do that. I've cut a lot of interviews together over the years. When you ask people about their past, they start listing things off and they kind of go like this. But then if they see something over there, they're like, oh my God, or they tell a joke and like they get louder. And their energy, but when they have to talk about something that's rote or that they've talked about a lot and they have a practice, they kind of have a canned response to it. They kind of talk like this. So I try to like not use any of that because it's boring. Someone saying something funny or coming out with a line or a joke, even if it's a non sequitur, will communicate who that person is.
So you're looking at not the words that they're saying, but the particular emotional response that they're having in that moment or whatever it is.
Yes. And I think that, and I've done this in other videos, like you could literally make the whole interview those non sequiturs and it totally works. You don't, I mean, sometimes you'll need to cover a certain topic. And the way to do that is to kind of surround that. If they drop energy to kind of talk about that one thing that you kind of need them to talk about, then you need to like kind of surround that moment with these other more exuberant moments so that you've earned that moment.
Ben started producing films that had a social impact, like The Messenger, which was nominated for 2 Academy Awards.
Okay, that little thing. That's a thing that you do a lot in your what's the look on your face
no,
for?
I do that.
But that's like a trademark thing. That like instantly feels like your voice as a filmmaker.
When I'm editing, doing the radio edit, it's like something needs to go there. Mm-hmm. I need to fill up dead space. And like it just is like, oh, that needs to go there to punctuate that moment.
One of the reasons it's so effective is because you like tell the story with the words, you're telling the story with the feeling, and then you're also telling the story with the sound. And it's like the same story coming at you from like all of the places. And it just really like it from an engagement perspective and also just from like an understanding perspective, it like increases my comprehension of the story. Maybe I'm being like very technical right now, but like there's no way I can watch that sequence and not get the story.
Yeah, when I was working with Casey a lot at the beginning, he would say to me, "Oh man, that's so pleasing. I want this to be the most pleasingly edited thing possible." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting that he sees it as pleasing. Like I never thought about that. But yeah, I guess it pleases me. It it hits my buttons. And so I like hitting those buttons. But like when you're making music and like you get to the end of a song, like how a musician decides like what that last note is. It's like does it end like a bump, bum, or is it like a fade out, or is it like is it an off note or something like that? That's something that you feel, right? You get to the end of it and you're like, oh, it needs this. It needs a little flourish at the end or not. Mm-hmm. And I think that you couldn't really do that until nonlinear editing, right? Like I started on Final Cut 1. All of a sudden I was like, this is the best video game I've ever played. Because I can like sit here and try different permutations of this until they click in to something, and then you can feel your way around, and then this can go here. It's like it's puzzling, and then you're just like, oh yeah, this is the way the puzzle should come together.
That's what's maybe another thing that's characteristic about your work is the rhythm of it. The rhythm always feels like it makes sense. Like even the rhythm of the ding ding is like it's not ding ding, it's ding ding. Like that's a very intentional rhythm. And sometimes it matches the vocals, sometimes it matches the music, but when you use those sorts of moments, the rhythm always feels right to me. It always just feels like pleasing.
Everyone understands music, right? They might not understand the words. And if there's a way to kind of turn it all into music. Ugh. And so you can make these crazy cuts that are not rational. You're like, it doesn't make any rational sense to cut from this thing to this thing. But because you're following a musical logic, you can get away with it.
Love that.
If our culture was oriented around performance, then theoretically high performers would be happy. And Ben has spent a long enough time in that world to tell me if that were true.
So that's actually still like a little rough. Like I'm still, as we sit here now, the thing hasn't come out yet. I still have like a few more days to to massage that. and I probably will.
Yeah. I'm just curious, when you say that, what sticks out to you as like, that's rough?
The rhythm of the money and the person hitting the golf ball. Like one shot's really fast and the other one's slow, and like the relationship between them isn't quite as crisp.
If our culture was oriented around performance,
At some point you run out of time, and then you're like, it's fine. It's good enough.
Okay, so is that what happens with your work?
It has to yes.
So you're done when you run out of time.
I've just found over the years, I'm very bad at holding myself to artificial deadlines. So what I'll do is I will create a real deadline. I have a screening. I've invited a lot of people to these screenings, and so now I have to finish it. So I'll paint myself into a corner, and then it's like, well, whatever's not fully done by that point, let it go.
At some point, you abandon it camp of finishing things.
Yes, but if you spoke to my wife or my assistant or any of my friends, they'd be like, you hang on for way too long.
So happiness started when life started. The starting point was dopamine. Dopamine creates motivation, primarily to find food. So whoever in evolution had more dopamine was finding more food, and that proliferated more.
So that definitely, now that I've heard you talk about the way you edit, that sequence definitely feels like audio first.
Definitely.
What are you looking through then? What catalog of music are you looking through to find songs?
It's my messy iTunes. Whether I'm driving or I'm walking down the street with my headphones, like I'll make a playlist that has kind of the general vibe of what I think. This happiness series kind of has like this like PBS 1980s like electronic like analog sound to it that I made a playlist of things, and I've also friends that are in bands, and I try to kind of stick to that stuff because I like working with my friends. It's also much easier to clear. But occasionally I'll totally fall in love with a track that I know I'll have to license, but it has to be special. Sometimes I'll just throw a track that I know I would have to license in there because I know it's the right vibe. It's like close to the right thing, and it's close enough that I'll be able to map the dialogue on top of it and then switch it out for something better.
When you edit on a piece of music, are you cutting ever on beat of that piece, or do you try to avoid that?
It's a good question. The answer is sometimes yes, but I don't go through and mark where the beats are and then try to cut on that. I don't know. I read this book early on that's kind of like a seminal book for all editors called it's Walter Murch's In the Blink of an Eye. Right.
I love that book.
It kind of changed my life. The way he would make an edit is he would basically like he would play the thing and then feel where the edit should be. And he would like do that, but he would like kind of do a dry run of that like 3 or 4 times. And like if he chose the same place 2 out of those 4 times or 3 out of those 4 times, he knew that that's where the edit should be.
And you have to feel the moment where you're going to cut. And at the appropriate moment, I would feel there. And then I would mark the film, and then I would run it again, and did that little mark seem to come at the right point for a cut.
And so I kind of follow that kind of gut logic. And sometimes it's on like the full note, and then sometimes it's on the when you're going double time.
Right.
If we talked about make it count, you know, if you're going to end up like going, you know, whatever, quadruple time or double time, once you start going faster, you can't
pull back.
You can't pull back.
Yeah. You have to go faster. You can't go slower.
Right. Or you can really lean into a moment where you're going to slow down.
Right.
But then you're going to have to own that.
Right. Makes sense.
In essence, I was hammering on dopamine and serotonin for years. I had to spend more and more time to get a little bit of a reward from these two neurotransmitters. I even decided to move to Boston and leave the family at home. That means oxytocin goes to 0. There were no friends at the time, no cannabinoids. There was, I think, no pleasure either. Let's leave the sex out for a second, most probably not. And the very important thing to understand is that there is no chance of overfilling dopamine and serotonin to an amount that it overflows and it fills also cannabinoids, opioids, oxytocin. This is not possible.
I'm imagining your brain as he's saying that, imagining that sequence. When did you come up with that, and how did that happen?
When I started editing, I worked at this company called Good Magazine, and a lot of what we were doing were infographic videos, right? And so a lot of it is like there would be text on screen, or we're communicating an idea. How do you land an idea? It's like Inception. Like how do you make sure it goes in?
Yes.
Right? And part of it is like the musicality feeling right, and the words, and the way you get the audience to a place where you then like kind of lay the egg. Or it's like you get them to a soft enough place, and then you drop the pearl. But you've got to like romance them, and you've got to seduce them, and you got to there's foreplay, and then there's that. But then there's the moment where you do the thing. And I knew I wanted to get to the point where those 2 test tubes overflow.
Ugh.
I had Axel's interview, and I put it on the music track, and this is the right emotion here, and it follows from the emotion we just came from, and here is how I'm going to break up his voice, because if I just let it go, then they have no rhythm to it, and you wouldn't feel it. So it's like, okay, and then in the places where I'm breaking up his voice, that's where there'll be this like kind of little duet between what he's saying, and then we're going to marry that to the metaphor. And then once he kind of lands his point, then we're going to go to the metaphor to land the metaphor. And so between the music, his kind of intellectual or very kind of scientific narration, and then the metaphor, the menage a trois of those 3 things like interweaving, like it makes it go in.
Yeah.
And by the way, I had a great editor kind of do a first pass of all of these episodes. I'll end up like reshaping a lot of stuff, but some of the stuff he did, a lot of it has stayed to the end. His name is Alex Odesmith. He's a great editor.
How do you work with Alex? Is he learning your style? Is he anticipating your feedback and adjusting his style to feel like Max Joseph? Is he being Alex? Like, how are you guys working together to make this?
So my collaboration with Alex is very recent. It's only in the last few years. And when I first started editing, I was like, oh, everyone edits this way. But I kind of was like, I found through trial and error hiring editors where it's like, oh, this way of doing things is not as obvious to other people as it is to me. His editing style is similar. It's not the same. There are disparities, but it's similar enough that I can kind of take what he's done and make it work for me in fewer steps than someone else. What I started to do, and I'm still haven't fully gotten this to work either, but it's working better, is that I'll do the radio edit, and then I'll give the radio edit to an editor. And it's essentially like, fill this in.
Oh.
So now it's like I have the movements and the sections blocked out, and now it's just like, now you've got to populate it.
So it's like a Max Joseph narrative and a sort of structure that someone else has to like find the right puzzle pieces for the right moments.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's not how I worked with Alex. Alex actually took the raw material. I kind of gave him, just off the top of my head, I think that the flow of the chapter the flow of the information, like we should meet this person first, and they need to say this thing and lay this egg. And then once they lay that egg, then we kind of pivot and go somewhere else. And so I would kind of give him that. and he would put together these great sequences, and I would kind of like then chop them up and move this one here, this one there, maybe like, just move it around a little bit.
Great shot.
Our well-being is deeply relational. A huge part of our being is wired for social relationship. It's been constructed over a few 100,000 years of existence. The family, the friendships, all of these have huge impacts on our ability to function. And so the lack of social relationships is very damaging to our biology itself.
Is that found footage mostly? Like, where are you getting all that?
The gift that keeps on giving, which is archive.org. The Prelinger library is a great, most of it is public domain. That's also why I like classical music so much. It's cheap. So is that stock footage, and it also has like there's an emotional nostalgia element to it. It's not super digital and clean, and like I don't like using Pond 5 or any of those or Getty too much. I'd rather find other things if I can't film it myself.
That also seems like a piece of your style. I don't know. I would call it like a 50s and 60s. It's not nostalgia, but it's like a standing on the shoulders of giants, or like homage to that era of culture, filmmaking, storytelling. There's something about a lot of your work that like acknowledges that period of history in a way. Maybe it's because of that footage or the stuff that I've seen, but it just feels like it's a piece of your voice as an artist.
I mean, I really like DJ Shadow, and I like Wu-Tang Clan, and I like these. I was really into trip hop in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and they all were really great They sampled, Moby's Play album. Like there's something about that aesthetic that I do find like alluring, but I also like the idea of like playing off of it and remixing it.
Max, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks
and for doing
having
this
me.
with us. This is awesome. I'm so excited that this series is happening.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, no, it was great.